So Britain is heading back to the polls on December the 12th for the third time in 4 years. They will vote in a general election, and one thing will dominate.
To get Brexit done, and there is only one way to get Brexit done.
Drop the deal, because it's not Brexit.
Labour will get Brexit sorted within 6 months.
Catastrophic cliff edge of a no-deal Brexit.
Britain was supposed to leave the EU in March, and in April, and again in October. But it's in the midst of another extension, and political parties are hoping a majority will unlock the parliamentary paralysis. Here's why. There are 650 constituencies in the United Kingdom, from Orkney and Shetland in the north to St Ives in the south. To get a majority in Parliament, you need 326 seats. And that is where the problem has been for Theresa May and Boris Johnson since 2017. Neither have had a majority on their own, meaning getting anything done was a problem. Theresa May relied on the support of the Northern Irish Democratic Unionist Party, while Boris Johnson had even less of a majority after taking the whip off MPs who rebelled over Brexit. Here is where the big parties stand. Boris Johnson's Conservative Party have a simple message: get Brexit done. They were the biggest party in 2017, but will be hoping for a clear majority this time to push the Prime Minister's Brexit deal through. In 2017, Labour did unexpectedly well, but they still ended up the minority party. Their Brexit policy is less clear-cut than others. They now support a second referendum, and they're trying to thread the needle with their support base, some of whom are Remainers and others who are Leavers. The Scottish National Party currently has 35 seats, but that could rise because of Boris Johnson's relative unpopularity and Scotland's vote to Remain in 2016. And that is precisely what the SNP will campaign for: Remain and Scottish independence. The Liberal Democrats had a tumultuous political decade. They were coalition partners from 2010 to 2015, and that decimated their political support. Now they're standing on a clear platform of remaining in the EU, and they're polling in double digits. Now, one party, not even in Parliament, but who could play a huge role in the election, is the Brexit Party. It didn't exist in 2017, but they won the most votes in May's European elections. Led by Nigel Farage, their Brexit policy is clear. They want out, and they want a clean break from Europe. Britain's going through one of the most volatile political moments in its history, and the last few votes have shown that elections are just that. In short, no one knows how Parliament will look on December the 13th.
What I can tell you about the Trump policy toward the Ukraine, it was incoherent. It depends on who you talk to. They seem to be incapable of forming a quid pro quo. So, no, I find the whole process to be a sham, and I'm not going to legitimize it.
Chairman, what changed your mind? You told Axios that you were willing to be open to hearing about
things. Yeah, but you didn't get the whole thing. If you can show me there's a criminal misconduct here. This is a joke. I've read the phone call for myself. The president of the Ukraine said there's no quid pro quo. It never ends. What changed my mind is when Schiff came up with a process that's vastly different than what every other president was allowed to do when it came to defending themselves. I think the whole thing is sour grapes and, politically driven. This is the first time anybody's ever been impeached by a partisan. The last time we did this, it was with special counsels.
But as a juror, shouldn't you read all the...
I'm not a juror here.
Well, eventually you might be
I might be.
Shouldn't you eventually read all that?
Aren't I just telling you, just as honestly as I think the whole thing's a crock? If Mueller had found something, it would have been completely different because I trusted Mueller. I've looked at the phone call. I don't care what Sunderland presumes. Show me where there's a quid pro quo. The president of the Ukraine says there was not. I've seen no evidence there was. The whole thing is manufactured. It's never ending. So if you send it over here based on the phone call, it's going nowhere. I've done everything but take an ad out in the paper. This whole theory of impeachment, the process, is illegitimate, is outside the norm. This substance I find unpersuasive.
What key witnesses in the impeachment inquiry told lawmakers? We now have the transcripts of their depositions before the 3 House impeachment committees. Long-serving career diplomat William Taylor told lawmakers it was his clear understanding, his words, his clear understanding that U.S. security aid was being withheld from Ukraine until Ukraine did for President Trump what would amount to personal political favors, something that committee chairman Adam Schiff questioned him about. Schiff: and when you say that, this was the first time I heard that the security assistance, not just the White House meeting, was conditioned on the investigation. When you talk about condition, did you mean that if they didn't do this, the investigations, they weren't going to get that, the meeting and the military assistance? Taylor: that was my clear understanding. Security assistance money would not come until the president committed to pursue the investigation. Then Schiff said, so if they don't do this, they're not going to get that, was your understanding? Taylor: yes, sir. Then Chairman Schiff asks him, are you aware that quid pro quo literally means this for that? Ambassador Taylor replies, I am. This is, of course, the very thing, in the very words that the president and his defenders have been saying did not happen. Gordon Sondland's impeachment testimony was released, but it turns out he'd revised his previous testimony. Apparently, his faulty memory was suddenly restored after details of other witness testimony made clear that Sondland's original story didn't quite add up.
No quid pro quo. No quid pro quo. No quid pro quo. No quid pro quo. No quid pro quo.
Well, that, as you know, was a pillar of the president's defense even before we saw the rough transcript of his July 25th call with Ukraine's President Zelensky. Sondland now says, yes, there was a quid pro quo, and he was the guy who was trying to deliver it for the president. A scheme, he testified, got more insidious, his word, over time, involving activities he said would be improper and, though he said he's not a lawyer, assumed could be illegal. Sondland now admits that he knew the bottom line. In short, no U.S. military aid until Ukraine publicly did the president two political favors. Here's what Sondland says in his revised testimony, referring to a conversation on the 1st of September with the top advisor to President Zelensky. Quoting from Sondland, I now recall speaking individually with Mr. Yermak, where I said the resumption of U.S. aid would likely not occur until Ukraine provided the public anti-corruption statement that we had been discussing for many weeks. You might look at that and say, well, corruption, of course, that's all the president's ever been interested in. He wants to clean up corruption in Ukraine. Sondland describes talking about it with Rudy Giuliani starting in August. Quoting now from Sondland, in these short conversations, Mr. Giuliani emphasized that the president wanted a public statement from President Zelensky committing Ukraine to look into anti-corruption issues. Mr. Giuliani specifically mentioned the 2016 election, including the DNC server and Burisma, as two anti-corruption investigatory topics of importance for the president. And if that were the sum total of what Sondland, the ambassador of the European Union, told House investigators, that would be plenty, but it wasn't. Giuliani's clearly the heart of this Ukraine adventure, but now it seems Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also has some explaining to do.
During your time there, did you meet with Giuliani?
You know, I don't talk about who I meet with.
Thanks to Gordon Sondland's testimony, we now know that Secretary Pompeo knew full well Giuliani was up to something. Question: did you ever discuss Rudy Giuliani with Secretary Pompeo? Sondland: only in general terms. Question: and what did you discuss? Sondland: that he's involved in affairs, and Pompeo rolled his eyes and said, yes, it's something we have to deal with. Now, the sworn statements of the former senior advisor to Secretary of State Pompeo, Ambassador Michael McKinley. Quote, the timing of my resignation, he testified, was the result of two overriding concerns. The failure, in my view, of the State Department to offer support to foreign employees caught up in the impeachment inquiry, and second, by what appears to be the utilization of our ambassadors overseas to advance domestic political objectives. Specifically, the president's Ukraine envoy, Kurt Volker, European Union ambassador and campaign donor Gordon Sondland, and Rudy Giuliani. As Ambassador McKinley tells it, quote, what is clear is that both Volker and Sondland were engaging the Ukrainian government in conjunction with Rudy Giuliani on domestic political issues. And Marie Yovanovitch, former ambassador to Ukraine. It's clear from Ambassador Yovanovitch's testimony that Giuliani's efforts in Ukraine were extensive, involving her specifically, dating back to late last year. It became clear, she said, that the goal was removing her from her post. One point of contention, her alleged role in blocking Giuliani's effort to bring ousted Ukrainian prosecutor Viktor Shokin to the U.S., apparently in pursuit of Giuliani's political mission for the president. Following long-standing protocol, an American consular officer denied him a visa because of his alleged ties to large-scale corruption. Ambassador Yovanovitch picks up the story, quote, and the next thing we knew, Mayor Giuliani was calling the White House as well as the Assistant Secretary for Consular Affairs, saying that I was blocking the visa for Mr. Shokin and that Mr. Shokin was coming to meet him and provide information about corruption at the embassy, including my corruption. As you might imagine, none of what Giuliani was saying about the ambassador made Ms. Yovanovitch a favorite back in Washington. And this, she said, was making top Ukrainian officials uneasy. She raised concerns about it to Gordon Sondland, another of the president's emissaries. Sondland, she says, told her, and I quote, "You need to go big or go home. You need to, tweet out there that you support the president and that all these are lies and everything else." By May, however, she was removed from her post. Now, this is not, it is safe to say, how any of this is really supposed to work. Not the ambassador's removal, not career first aid through Twitter, not any of it. Or, as Ambassador McKinley put it in his testimony, in 37 years in the Foreign Service in different parts of the globe and working on many controversial issues, working 10 years back in Washington, I had never seen that.